I want you to consider this statistic. Fewer than 33% of Republicans in America believe that climate change is the result of burning fossil fuels. This despite an unprecedented worldwide scientific consensus that it is. And we all know scientists like to agree. They don't. Maybe about gravity. Over 13,000, nearly 14,000 peer-reviewed scientific papers affirm this, 24 deny it. And yet, Republican disbelief persists. People around the world, indeed people in this audience, are flummoxed. What is going on in the United States? Historically, Republicans are not anti-science. Lincoln established the National Academy of Sciences, nor are they anti-environment. Nixon established the Environmental Protection Agency. Republicans are conservative. They conserve. My work is climate and energy. But personally, I'm driven because my kids are losing hope. They watch as the US not only lags but drags the rest of the world down when dealing with this problem. How is it that we've become so polarized and paralyzed? And since when is scientific certainty a matter of politics and belief? To try to understand this, I had to do something extremely uncomfortable. I had to burst my own ideological bubble. Mine was a liberal bubble. I grew up in a progressive household, so politically embedded, literally, that the phone next to my parents' bed was a direct line to the White House. And it rang 24/7 during the reign of Lyndon Baines Johnson. But while I grew up thinking the progressive agenda was the right agenda, I wasn't deaf to those on the right. That's harder to be today. As mainstream media is contracting and opinion media is exploding, and the internet is designed to give you back only what you want to know, our ideological bubbles are becoming more isolated and insulated than ever. And researchers like Dan Kahan at Yale have found that it's those bubbles, the cultural values and the groups that hold them, have more impact on our perception of certain issues than our understanding of the science. Indeed, the more scientifically literate you become, the more you use that information to confirm the views of your group. So the more conservative you are, and the more you know about science, the more you think climate is not a problem. And this is somewhat of a problem. But it isn't just the purview of the right. The left does it too on a number of different issues. And it still doesn't explain why Republicans are on the wrong side of the scientific consensus. And that question kind of drove my own personal odyssey. And I traveled to the Midwest and the Southeast in places that are much more conservative and much more dependent on fossil fuels than the rest of the country. And I got to know some very conservative leaders of organizations representing millions on the right. And after months of conversation and correspondence and meetings and late-night confessions, neither easy nor comfortable, I actually grew to love these leaders. These are people my liberal colleagues routinely demonize. And I discovered three things. One, malfeasance does exist. Not such a big discovery, I realize. But hear me out. The fossil fuel industry has been very, very good to us. But increasingly, its costs are being borne by society. And it doesn't want to change that up. So it's been spending billions of dollars on a disinformation campaign to confuse the public about climate science. And it's using, in many cases, the very same scientists that the tobacco industry used to tell us tobacco wasn't a problem. Two, conservatives are being targeted on the Hill and in the heartland. One Republican congressman told me, yeah, I get it about climate change, but I can't take it on because I'm going to get taken out. An evangelical, and that's easy to do, an evangelical conservative said, we conservatives are frightened of anything that appears to threaten the values we hold dear. And that's exactly what the disinformation campaign does. It frames the solutions to climate change as contracting personal freedoms and expanding government, when in fact, all that needs to happen is to stop socializing the costs of one industry. Another conservative told me, though, but we Republicans can't advance our own solutions to this until we acknowledge the problem in the first place. Leads me to three. We liberals can be our own worst enemy. Sometimes we think we own the high moral ground, and that tends to cause us to disrespect and demonize people who are not part of the choir. It also leads to a somewhat distorted worldview where being right is more important than finding solutions. And I'll give you an example. Governor John Kasich, a Republican of Ohio, publicly acknowledged last year that climate change is a problem. And what did we liberals do? We plastered his face and his quote on billboards all around the Republican convention hall. I'm not sure why, but we made him a pariah in his party, and he's not talking about climate change anymore. We liberals think that if we scream loud enough and long enough, Republicans will finally get it about climate, when in fact the opposite is true. But the dynamic is changing outside the Beltway and outside national media. The urgency, gravity, and opportunity of this moment is actually becoming quite apparent. Extreme weather trumps politics. And Republicans and Democrats are working together in the flooded trenches of New York and New Jersey and the parched farmlands of Kansas and Colorado and Texas to deal with the impacts. And states across the country, Republicans and Democrats, are moving to cleaner, more efficient forms of energy because it makes economic sense. My travels have changed me. I can't call myself a liberal anymore. That bubble has burst. I know too much about the forces at work to keep us apart, and I care too much about the leaders that I've grown to know. These are courageous leaders. They've managed to transcend their ideological boundaries and understand the science because they learned largely from someone they trusted. But they get the risk, and to ignore the risk is not conservative. They are working to bring their constituencies along because they also see the opportunity. It's a moment in history with opportunity to move from a dirty, dying economy to a clean, thriving economy. It's a moment when we could actually grow prosperity. It's a moment when we could actually expand personal freedoms. Imagine owning your own electricity. Imagine an oil regime without that kind of power. It's a moment, these leaders think, when maybe, just maybe, we can discover our shared humanity and forge solutions that can unite and not divide us. Thank you.